everyone. We're so delighted to have Tim Gill on with us today. Tim is, hi Tim, living legend basically. Principal cello of the London Sinfonietta, former principal cello of the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra and English National Opera. He also teaches cello at the Guildhall School of Music and is just, a champion of contemporary repertoire among many other things. So
I was just thinking somebody should write a contemporary version of Popper, because it's not, it's nothing ever gets taught about how to play contemporary music. But maybe I'll do that when I get really.
That's your next lockdown project, Tim.
Yeah.
Tim, it's a pleasure to have you on. I've heard so much about you from Katie, so we're just delighted to put a face to the name and the stories. So
thanks, Ailbhe. Lovely to meet you too for the first time.
Popper bringing people together. It's like, who would have thought?
There's a thought, isn't it? Yeah, who would have thought
it's much nicer to learn it with people than to be doing
Popper 4.
Why did you want to do this one?
I chose this because I'm a bit of a masochist, and way back when I was learning with Christopher Bunting, who I learnt with when I was at university.
Oh, cool.
He was fantastic. I don't know if you've heard of him, but
his books, obviously.
His book, The Craft of Cello Playing. Yeah. He was an amazing guy, actually. He was like multi-talented, it's a fantastic pianist and got a first in engineering, I think, at Cambridge.
Wow.
So he was really kind of bright. And I kind of totally revered him as a cellist because he was very, he was like technically immaculate. Although Jodie always disagrees with me about that. But anyway, and he said to me, we were sort of going through it, he was absolutely addicted to Popper studies. He said they were like the sort of Bible of cello playing. And he said to me, we kind of did Popper 8 and Popper 12 and sort of things like that. And then he said, and then there's Popper 4. That's a real beast. I've never tried that one. So I kind of thought, so I sort of had a thing about it for ages, like, this is impossibly difficult. I won't even try it. And then I thought, actually, during lockdown, as we all do, because we all want challenges in lockdown, I thought, well, I'll give it a go. Surely it can't be that hard. And I kind of got into it a bit. It's a really lovely study. It's just in a very difficult key, a sharp major, and I think the reason Christopher said, it's a real pig, is that it puts a lot of pressure on the left hand, because you never really get a kind of break, and particularly it puts a lot of pressure on the thumb. So
it's just such an awkward area to start, even in thumb position.
Yes,
we don't play a lot of stuff around this area because generally we're down in our local positions, whereas suddenly there's this, and it's, I don't know about you, but depending on your hand shape, you really have to actually adapt the weight balance quite a bit to be super in tune. It's just nasty. So the first 2 bars, even, you're like, will I just go on to the next one?
And it's actually quite a wide stretch for the thumb. If you were playing that sort of up here somewhere, it would be a lot more comfortable for the hand, but here there's already quite a big stretch, in that part of the hand. And I suppose the key to it is sort of finding a way to relax as you play, and that's not always easy, but it's.
Yeah, let's see for our playthroughs how that
famous
goes.
Last words. We'll talk about this more, I'm sure, but it's also building that thumb endurance, isn't it? It's one thing to be able to do 4 lines of this, but by the time you get, I don't know about you guys, but the last 3 lines of this study are just completely killer for me.
Yeah, I know. Really hard. It's sort of when he repeats the whole thing, you kind of think, oh my God, do I really have to play all of this again? And then, as you say, that little kind of coda is really nasty, Another thing he uses quite a lot is the 4th finger. Sort of up high, which is again is a bit of a kind of no-go area for me. I try not to use my 4th finger at all, actually, but particularly up high, it's sort of to make it sort of sound nice. and you get all that stuff at the end.
Yeah.
Where you're using the fourth finger, but also at the beginning. I think one of the most difficult things about this is what happens in the fourth bar, third to the fourth bar, where you suddenly got to sort of get that and try to make that sound nice. That sort of fifth going from a thumb to a fourth finger is really tricky, I think. And then what's even worse is that he puts like a tone in between the fourth and the third finger, which is another kind of stretch for the hand. Yeah. So they're all. I think the challenge really is just to sort of try to stay loose and try to sort of find ways of taking the pressure off the thumb when you can. And there are bits of it where you can take the pressure off the thumb, and just kind of sometimes release different bits of the thumb. So that you're kind of. You've got that, like, I always think that the last note, if you can even sort of do something like that, where you're not kind of putting so much pressure on that part of the thumb.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that you just kind of find little ways of just sort of just easing things, and hopefully, that helps with, as you say, Katie, sort of building up the endurance.
Totally.
Yeah, it's really interesting for me, the different challenges with all of that, and where, I mean, specifically even thinking about when you're going to move your thumb across. I don't know if some people actually say that they often will leave their thumb over 3 strings, which I never do. I mean, I always use. So even at the very beginning, what I find fascinating about this is after you think about all that thumb thing, Katie knows from me that I tend to, because we're doing one a week, I'm like, less is more. I'm just not going to practice that middle bit. I'm going to have to see in the playthrough how my thumb arrives on the end, so you guys will be having a good laugh at that. But I find it really fascinating to eventually, we'd only a couple of days, but then I suddenly was like, right, so this study, the bow is actually way less is more, like you say, because you can't force both hands. There's a lot of weight in one hand. Yeah. The lighter you go in the bow, the more effective your sound is. Even though you wouldn't think that necessarily as you go up. So,
absolutely. As often with Popper, he's actually quite kind to you in certain ways. In that he often, a lot of his studies like this are often marked piano. So you don't, he doesn't want you to kind of force the sound at all.
Yeah, which is brilliant, and also then the melodic, I think, idea of it, where you have this kind of like babbling brook, and then the third and the fourth bar always seem to go, so you can actually turn this into a really musical piece of work if you can get outside your own head.
That's right. After months of practice.
They're all great. Exactly. They're all lovely pieces of music in a way, actually. I think that's what attracted my old teacher to it. He said that they were the most musical of the studies.
Sure.
In a way.
Yeah.
So when you say where do you put your thumb across? You mean in the third bar?
Yeah, exactly. So at what point do you decide? You have to make these decisions. Like, where would you just at the very beginning of the bar? So you're do you want to instantly? Where do you actually move it? Do you move it?
Yeah, I see. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. I hadn't thought about that actually. So I suppose now thinking about it, I start off with my thumb kind of basically over the G and D strings. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. So it's actually on that A sharp. I sort of take the thumb off a bit.
Exactly,
and put it
then
across.
You can take away the pressure as well. So you're
yes.
thinking about that's a release
giving
moment.
yourself a little break. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good idea.
And it's important when you're learning. I think, a lot of people approach, like we all said, like in college, you're like, this is like, no, just moving on to the next one. Whereas if you have little tricks like that you're like, okay, specific thumb movement, here we go, and you might bin it later, but it's nice to have an idea in your head first, right?
Yes.
Totally. I think always looking for opportunities where you can release the weight, like as you both have said, is so important in this. And so I've got a question for you guys. Tim, we're really nerdy. We have bar numbers because we're playing off this like fancy reader edition.
That means I'm going to have to keep counting.
Well, this
Bar
is the
65.
second
Hang on a
line.
minute. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, yeah.
It
go
all
on.
repeats itself
Bar
anyway. It's
7.
fine, right?
Bar 7, when we have
Yeah.
the shifty bar.
Yes.
How do you approach this? And, you know, we're kind of bunging along in a similar position, and suddenly we have to do a lot of shifts in one bar. What do you do to guarantee this is successful?
Oh my
Do you have any
God.
strategies?
I don't.
I
I
love
never guarantee. I
love
never
it.
make
Straight
any
in.
guarantees. I think I don't know. So that bar, I think you have to
Lovely.
sort of do, you know, make sure the whole arm is kind of moving as a unit. It's all kind of moving at the same time, but at the same time, obviously, there are bigger gaps. So there are different size gaps between your thumb and second finger, or thumb and third finger. Yeah. So I think what's key to me in that bit is the quality of the shift. So you want to try to make the shift with the whole hand, but particularly with the thumb, very kind of gentle somehow. So if you're so the hand is always kind of relaxed as it shifts. You know what I mean?
That's huge. That's the big plan for it, right? Where if you can manage to still have that same rotation and lift in a shift that you would have with your first finger, between
Yes.
your thumb shifts, then you're kind of golden with keeping that zipper where your bow is going to be 100% same speed, same weight, everything, so it's not being interfered with by the left hand. I think we pretty much did the same thing. I did making sure like the link notes very, very
Link notes.
So you're making sure that you are actually shifting.
Yeah.
You know, you're
Yes.
practicing that kind of weird thumb, and then you're trying to actually just practice that separately on its own.
Right.
Adding in the
And
fingers.
somehow sort of getting a feeling that the arm is kind of moving in a nice kind of easy supportive way. Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of moving as you would like a shift if you're just shifting normally. So that you're kind of keeping that sort of nice easy movement with the arm.
Yeah.
I think
It's tricky though.
Yeah.
it is tricky. I mean, and that brings in maybe like another point I could add to this, which is, I mean, the first few bars are very difficult, but I think Popper makes you have this hierarchy of concentration sort of for different places. So it sort of makes you approach something that you can't be so consumed with what you're playing in the previous bars that you're not kind of thinking ahead and anticipating this slightly more difficult, or maybe it's not more difficult for everyone, but definitely a different challenge than the first 5 bars or whatever. And always having that like level of we need to have this enough in our hand that we're able to look ahead and think about other things.
Yeah,
Be
that's
consumed
right.
by what we're doing.
I think it's a good sort of technical point for the left hand, that because if you look at the first 2 bars, you're kind of quite set though, and it's very easy there to kind of feel right. Okay, I'm going to just bed in here, you know, and sort of right.
Yeah.
But actually, then from the 3rd bar onwards, you suddenly got to move, and I think it's quite an important aspect of left hand technique that actually even when you're in a stationary sort of position when you're playing the hand should always be ready to move. Do you know what I mean? So that it's even when you're kind of playing a long note, it has that sort of lightness in it, so that it's almost like, I like to think of it like you're touching something hot, you know. And it can easily just that reflex.
I was just going to say, they say that in singing as well, where if you're going to go to a higher note, you should always be thinking about where the muscles are in that higher note.
Right.
So that you're kind of already on that train. And I think it's a similar feeling actually for the cello, that you're never set down in one place, because it's too much effort to kind of go again.
Yeah.
You really have to be kind of on movement, you know.
Yeah. Preparation is all. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that I think that sort of lightness and that ability just to kind of almost jump off a note where you have been sort of like stationary is really important with this. With that, actually, with a lot of popper, I think, you know, it's that sort of just being that ease that comes from kind of lightness in the left hand, I think.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you have to, you know how to sink into the fingerboard when you need to. Like, and I think the case in point of that is that fourth finger in the fourth bar. So you get the somehow that has to sort of have a kind of weight in it. I guess transferring the weight effectively from the thumb onto the fourth finger, which is tricky. It's not something that we often do. To sort of have that kind of feeling. And I think it's important, as with a lot of popper, a lot of technique, I think, not to sort of bang the fingers down, because that somehow gives the wrong sort of kinetic energy. It's more, I think, a question of just almost sinking in and sort of finding that sort of place, and then the weight comes, you know. So it's like a sort of gentle turning of the hand.
Yeah. No, it's brilliant, and that also the fact that depending on the shape and size of your hand as well, that you might need to actually incorporate a little bit of that wrist movement, so that you can get the most efficient weight over the fourth finger just in this diagonal area.
Absolutely,
so definitely.
And I think that's particularly true of the end bit that Katie was talking about. Anyway, all of that stuff, you know, sort of where you have to really bend the hand over. But just if you can sort of find a way of doing it sort of gently, so that you're not kind of banging the fingers, you know, but it's more of a sort of gentle turn. That's something that Rostropovich used to do a lot. I think there was that sort of Russian school, you know, where you sort of see him playing these incredibly sort of fast, difficult passages, but actually his fingers are sort of barely coming up from the string. They're sort of like almost embedded in the string, you know. And he used to talk about
doing his weights. All the time.
But it's a sort of mental thing in a way, you know. It's a bit like kung fu, you know, or karate, you know, when you're kind of chopping through something really hard, you know, it's the power of your concentration in your brain that's kind of going through the material sort of into it. It's a little bit like that, I think, you know, so that you get that kind of weight just going down.
Sure. I was going to say an analogy I use sometimes with my students is sort of like, especially up here in thumb position, I'm thinking of the bit when we have to go on the C string and the G string in the middle of the second page. It's sort of this feeling of like, I like to think of like a ballerina on whatever those ballerina shoes are called. The
points.
On points.
Stand up on your toes. On points, and that like sort of balance and just the whole weight is going into the feet, and they're very strong, even though they're small and all of that. And that sort of feeling of balance, I think, you know, it's a way of avoiding this sense of like, I must press the string down.
Yeah.
And
Katie,
find
are you
that
talking
string.
about the bits? Are you talking about the this bit? Yeah, right, absolutely. I mean, that's a case in point where I always find myself banging the strings. Actually, I don't know why.
Yeah, me too.
But yeah, as a challenge, if you can kind of find a way of just putting the finger down gently, so. And I was still banging a bit, but.
Well, plus by that point you're already a bit tired, so it's easier to sort of knock them out. What were you going to say, Ailbhe, though?
Well, I was just laughing at that. I would have thought after 20 poppers, you know, we've done a lot of like thumb prep. I kind of assumed, we just haven't done a few thumb ones recently, but I assumed, you know, I'd have a bank of thumb strength in, and I was like, what's that about? And like, in general, you know, we'd be pretty strong with all of that kind of stuff. I was just going to say again with that, the notes up at the top when you're playing your fourth finger, like we're bringing everything back to basics. you also don't want the highest note to be jutting out in a phrase. All of this has to be da 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 da. You know, it's all da
Right.
da da. So we also, if we can, think about while we're busy doing all of this, you know, that fourth finger slapping it down. Just it does anything that's going to actually emit a bump, squeak, anything that interrupts your general phrase at the end is a no-no. So that adds on to your, you know,
absolutely. And we haven't actually talked about vibrato on this, you know, and it seems like an impossibility. But actually, I think if you can, it's quite good to introduce a bit of vibrato because it releases the hand. So, you know, if you're, well, I mean, for instance, the bit slightly easier bit. So that you're kind of just giving it a little bit of color and, you know, and also it helps to kind of relax the hand, I think, too, if you can just vibrate a little bit. And also, I'm quite sort of in favor with Popper, generally, of, you know, not playing it completely rhythmically. I think you have to kind of start that way, but it's also a piece of music, and it's very much, you know, it's very much kind of shaped by its harmonies. And I think to sort of bring out, as you would in a normal piece of music, to bring out certain notes by kind of giving them a little stress is fine in my book. I think it's quite nice, actually.
Yeah, because you're practicing for real rep, right? So
well, yeah.
We have to learn how to guard that too and guide ourselves through all that. So
yeah. So another thing I quite like about, sorry, I was just going on a little bit, just so the when you get to the bits that I was just playing, that bit, there's a really nice thing that happens with the bow, which I think again he does a lot, where you're really aware of the arm kind of coming into play when you have to go for that kind of string cross onto the A string. I think it's a really nice thing to sort of bring into it. So it doesn't just become a sort of exercise in left hand.
Yeah, I think the bow actually is a huge part of when you're practicing this, that you, even at the start for coordination, you know, for someone who's actually finding this really quite tricky, so that like, just thinking about how you actually coordinate, if you let go too early, you know, the left hand, it's a bow rhythm, then it's a left hand rhythm, joining all that together, how's it legato going through your string crossings, you know, have you practiced all your double stops for tuning? I mean, there's just so many things you can do in this.
You know what I'm gonna say, Ailbhe.
I do.
The old stoppy starty. Yeah. Nice. I mean, I always do that in anything that's got long slurs, because for the bow distribution, it's really really helpful. I mean, I have to say though, after last week we had a session with Eric Kutz, and the way he was talking about legato, I was like, I need to do more of that, man. He does like every string crossing as a double stop, doesn't he, Ailbhe? Like, anyway, I'm not going to demonstrate that.
Yeah.
But
so it's very kind of gluey. Yeah,
exactly.
But definitely for knowing how much bow you want to use for each thing, and again, like in the third and fourth bar, it sort of makes sense from a musical point of view to be taking two bows, but then, you know, the next line, the bowing's always changing, and it's a question of, are we doing this to facilitate the phrasing, or is it more of like we want to keep the sound even, and, and all of that stuff. So
let's look at that bit. You know, where you go up to the top, those two bars, which I think are hard actually, though. So now coming down, I think that shift is really key when you're shifting on the thumb. That's a really nice kind of gentle shift. I like to kind of practice all these shifts really quite slowly, so that you're really kind of feeling them as they go up. So you get the. And that one again. Sorry, I'm not playing my Etude. So you're really kind of aware of exactly where the shift is happening.
Yeah.
And then when you speed it up, they don't become like too sort of hysterical. Do you know what I mean? So that there's still that kind of slowness in the. So they have a kind of sort of restfulness about them.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And that sounds super. It adds to the legato, then overall sound of everything. So you don't have any jerky shifts.
Yeah. No jerky shifts.
Yeah.
No jerks allowed. Just in general.
That's interesting. There's one little bar in there where. Do you notice there's suddenly a string crossing going from, and we're always obviously never supposed to be doing bow, and that's totally different to every other one. So it's bar 10, where suddenly we have to do a D string, A string, D string, and you have to be really ready for that and preparing.
Oh yeah.
That it can sometimes just kind of suddenly you'll get it. There goes the A string. It's a pity I didn't guard for that.
So you mean going back onto the A string with the?
Yeah, just to make sure that we're deciding.
Yeah.
You're using your fingers. Probably like finger is enough for that kind of a thing, so you don't get the arm too involved and add another jerk into everything.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Just what you need in the midst of that.
Are you playing off the Bärenreiter for this one, Ailbhe? Are you doing?
I am. Yes. I am.
Okay, because I'm noticing there'll be some fingering differences between. For this one, I think that the Bärenreiter recommends 96 to the crotchet. So.
That's really interesting, because that's exactly the tempo I came up with when I thought I'd better just test it. You know. Yeah.
The popper gods have spoken. That is
maybe Tim actually did this edition, and like he's not telling us. He's like, I don't know the Bärenreiter. You know?
That's his German.
So I've got this Nathan Stutch thing, which the International Music Company, which is the one
we all had growing up, I think.
Yes, I know. Yeah. So these fingerings in here are not poppers, are they? They're Nathan Stutches.
I do think all you've touched on a lot of themes, Tim, that exist through all of them we found, but like this fourth finger usage, everyone who comes on is like, I never use the fourth finger, and this is really interesting because it makes me use the fourth finger up here in thumb position, and those must be from Popper.
It is good, actually, yeah. But actually, a lot like Gritzmacher often uses that. You know, in his he's always doing stuff like that. So maybe it was like a thing. Maybe that's something that we've lost a bit. I don't know.
Yeah.
I've lost.
I had two, and I've actually. So I'm recording something next week that I have only learnt. I only got it in the post, and suddenly I was like, I could use my fourth finger here because it'll save me shifting. And suddenly I was like, this is the whole point, right, of being able to actually just enhance some of the things that you already have in your bag, and just making them useful for when you're really like short time.
I mean, something I can't do at all is trill with my fourth finger. I don't know if you ever do that, but I just never do it. You know, it sounds so kind of weak, and so that's one thing that I want to practice. And sort of, there are some people who just have this sort of electric trill, and I just can't do it. It just doesn't sound good.
That Foyard, the beginner trilling.
Yes, I know.
I mean, that's the only thing I ever do for trills, and it sorts it out.
Too.
And I play it for that one piece that you play your Haydn of the year, and then you go back and you don't trill again for a long time, and then it's great.
I think you sort of find, as you go through the profession, you kind of find things that you find out sort of what's important that you need to be able to do.
Time
And
is money.
probably trilling on a fourth finger is not one of those things.
Exactly.
But
If
actually,
you can shift to your first, why not?
really nice. But you're right, Katie. I mean, part of the main problem with this is stamina, which I guess is why, you know, he makes it like it is, that sort of relentless feeling, really. I mean, there's only sort of 4 bars in the whole thing where the triplets stop. And it's really it's hard to, I mean, you might be able to sort of play the first section, okay, but then you've got to play it again, you know, and then by the end you're really kind of cramped up. So it's I think it's sort of, it's finding ways of releasing as you play, which is a really big thing in cello playing, I guess, you know.
It is.
Sure.
Generally.
And I think this would be such a great one if you had to do something that was like really thumb intensive, and I don't know, you needed to build up. I'm like, the only thing I can think of off the top of my head, which is also sort of a study kind of thing, is like Piatti third caprice. Like if you needed to do something to really build up your thumb muscle, that you were performing, you know, like this would be such a good thing alongside to sort of build that muscle up. I mean, there's so many of these poppers that would be good for that, but this one I think especially.
Yes.
It's great for building.
It's also nice to just like find a study that you might have skipped back in your college days, that you come back to, and you actually, there's a real sense of achievement saying, okay, well, it is achievable. So that's something I think that you can always achieve something if you just put enough time into it. Probably more than a week though, I'd say.
So you've only been, so you must both be amazing now if you've kind of learned.
We're 20. Perfect. Yeah, you know.
Yes,
20
that is exactly what happens.
What do you think is the most difficult one?
Ooh.
It's interesting.
13 was hard, right? 13.
Yeah, I didn't think
38.
13. Yeah, 38 is tricky for like really nailing it fast, I think.
Yeah.
But I
13, yeah, that's hard. The octave one, that's a real kind of left hand.
We did that one before
13
Easter.
was so hard, like compared to what I thought it was as a student.
Yeah.
For some reason.
I like 13, but I've played it a lot, so it's sort of 38. I thought. I mean, you know what's interesting, Tim? It's like what you're saying about the trills. Like, Ailbhe, I've noticed so much. Like, you know, we have different things, like different strengths in our technique, and like the one I'm always saying to people is like, Ailbhe plays Popper 40 like it's nothing. Like, like sounds so good and clean because Ailbhe's also a pianist, and like it's got that kind of pianistic release technique. And I was just like hating that one so much. I was like, I can't do this. I'm never doing this like sort of harmonic business.
You sounded fabulous in that one. The only reason I actually loved that one so much was I was like, finally my thumb gets a break. I don't have to press 10 this week. I was like, woohoo, I can practice this. It's good.
Yes.
But yeah, they all have their challenges, don't they? And I think we could all, even no matter how good you are, that's what I'm finding at certain things like the octave ones. Like I know how to play octaves, everyone knows how to play octaves, but just there's certain things like the release that I might have to build in because they're so technique intensive.
Yeah.
I just wish, like before I learned the Dvorak first time, that someone had actually given me Popper 13. So when it came to I actually had the right feeling. Like I just didn't know what I was doing when I was a student learning that. And that kind of popper would have just built me up, and then I would have recognised it and gone, oh yeah.
I think that's right, isn't it? They all have like a sort of filter down effect, you know, that you're not necessarily going to be required any time to kind of use your thumb in the way that you are in this study, for instance. But it just makes it easier to play the bits that you do have to play.
Exactly. Super.
Totally. Right, are we going to have a go? easy, Tim.
You
Gosh.
did.
Really?
Absolutely
Really
did.
easy.
Yeah. Oh my God, it was
no.
so
All that
musical
pressure.
too.
Beautiful. Absolutely gorgeous, and such long, beautiful lines, and it's just lovely.
Woo.
Beautiful.
Tricky.
Beautiful.
Brilliant.
Actually,
Oh my
I don't
God.
know if it was the adrenaline of terror, but it didn't feel as tiring as but I think it's the old like, oh my God, other people.
Brilliant.
So,
Wow. That was super controlled, Katie, and everything.
Yeah.
oh,
You know.
bravo, Ailbhe!
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Man, that was
That was
super.
like-
Well done, both of you.
Quite nerve-wracking.
Yeah, I'm really nervous now.
That's the point.
No,
That's
it's
why
really-
this is like the best lockdown project because like we're making ourselves,
Like so
feel-
nervous that no other concert actually ever feels
Yes,
as
that's
bad.
right. Yeah, that end bit is a real killer, isn't it? When particularly when you're performing it, I think, and you sort of probably put a little bit more into the rest of it. Then suddenly you realise, oh my God, I've got to play this horrible bit at the end.
There's nothing left in the tank.
Nothing left in the
I
tank,
love it.
in the thumb tank.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Tim. This is just so fabulous.
No, it's a real
Yeah.
pleasure. Thank you, and what a great project you're doing.
Great.
Alright,
Okay,
see you
guys,
guys.
lovely to
Thanks so
see you.
much.
Yeah, thanks for having
Yeah,
me.
you
You too.
too.
Nice to meet you, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
Okay.